So let me just jump in here. So I did my Mangalacharan. I don't know where it dropped off there in the middle, but you can consider it done if you didn't hear it. So I'm off the top of a new file, and we're starting verse 117 today here in the Padyavali. So this is a very similar verse to the previous one, and we'll continue with similar discussion. So, next, the compiler presents a similar entreaty to Sri Bhagavan, meant to accompany an offering of foods to him. Yādṛśī vidurārpite mura-ripo kunty-arpite yādṛśī govardhana-mūrdhni pṛthuke stanye yaśodārpite Bharadvāja-samarpite śabarikā-datte'dhare yoṣitāṁ muni-bhāvinī-vinihite'nne'trāpi tam arpaya. O enemy of Mura, the pleasure which you felt in the food offered by Vidura, in the food offered by Kuntī, in the food atop Govardhana, in the abundant breastmilk offered by Yaśodā, in the food presented by Bharadvāja, in the food given by Śabarī, in the lips of the ladies of Vraja, and in the food offered by the wives of the sages. May you find that here too in this food offering being offered by me. So the construction is the same. As you took pleasure in the offering of all these great bhaktas, may you also take pleasure in this offering of mine. So some of the elements listed in this verse were also listed in the previous verse, so we won't discuss those again, but some of those who are mentioned here who weren't mentioned in the previous verse, then we'll look at those. And in particular, we'll look at the offerings of Govardhana. So get ready to go to the beautiful slopes of Sri Govardhana today. The food offered by Vidura was mentioned in the previous verse and discussed in the commentary thereupon. The mention of an offering of food made by Kuntī is obscure. Although Kunti Devi's expertly feeding Durvasa in her youth is described in Mahabharata, and although it can be assumed from narrations in Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam that Kunti Devi would in all likelihood have fed Bhagavan Sri Krishna during his visits to Hastinapur or Indraprastha or elsewhere, no specific description of Kunti Devi making an offering of food to Sri Bhagavan could be found in Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavatam, or any other text at the time of writing this commentary. So, more or less I'm saying, on this one I'm stumped, I have to say. I've asked a few scholars also, and they didn't find anything. So, I don't know where the poet is getting this, if he's referring to some poem or some passage somewhere. I can't find any specific description of Kunti feeding Krishna. So it's all certainly possible, and it makes sense, but in terms of there being an exact description somewhere, I can't find one. So if anybody knows, I would be very grateful if they would send it across. But in general, we can understand that the purity and depth of her bhakti is described throughout Mahabharata and vividly portrayed in the praises she offers to Bhagavan Sri Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus, Bhagavan Sri Krishna is undoubtedly deriving great pleasure from any food she might offer him by virtue of her exalted bhakti, at the very least, can also be said to be a sublime object of remembrance. So to think of how pleased he would be with her offerings, knowing how devout she was, that much we can do, but I can't find any other specific description about this, what might have inspired this poet to write this line. So, we'll move on. The verse under discussion next mentions the food atop Govardhana. Govardhana-mūrdhni. That is, the fruits, roots, and other foods that Govardhana offers atop his peak. So we'll examine this by way of a well-known statement in the Venu-gita. So the offering of food by Govardhana this offering of food by Govardhana can be appreciated through an expression of the Braja Gopis in the Venu-gita. Hantamadrira labha haridasa varyo yad Rama Krishna charana sparasha pramodha manam tanoti sahagoganayustayor yat pani suyavasa kandara kandamulai. Hanta, O ladies, this mountain is the best of Hari's servants, since he is possessed of great delight at the touch of Rama and Krishna's feet, and since he offers honor to them along with their cows and company, with beverages, fine grasses, hollows, bulbs, and roots. Okay, I see a line, looks like maybe the line dropped. I'll read the translation one more time. I'm not sure why the internet is so unreliable today. There's no storm going on, there's no apparent change in the immediate circumstances. This is the Venu-gita, the Braja Gopis. They're speaking to one another in adoration of Govardhana. This mountain is the best of Hari's servants, since he is possessed of great delight at the touch of Rama and Krishna's feet, and since he offers honor to them along with their cows in company, with beverages, fine grasses, hollows, bulbs, and roots. So now here's a compression of many of the fine comments made on this verse by our wonderful commentators. So Sri Sanatana Pad comments that the name Hari in this verse refers to Sri Krishna as he who takes away the sins and sufferings of all beings and captures their hearts. So the name Hari is derived from the dhatu hrit, which means to take. So Hari is, quote, the taker, or one who takes. So what does he take? Then Sanatana Gosvami is contextualizing that in two ways. And he's saying, Jagato ashesha papam dukam, that he's taking away all sin, he's taking away all sadness or suffering from people, and chittam, he's taking their hearts. In other words, he's captivating their minds, or he's attracting them. So Hari is such, he takes away everything. So in that way, he's interpreting the meaning of the sense of the word Hari here. And he adds that servants of Hari are also possessed of these qualities. So someone who's very devoted to someone who has this ability, then some of that ability of the object of devotion begins to manifest in the devotee. So he takes it then that those who are servants of Hari also have the ability to purify others of sin and to captivate their minds. So then he goes on to illustrate how Govardhana does this. Thus, that Govardhana is said here to be the best of all of Hari's servants, or the gopis called him Haridasa Varya. So Varya means the most choiced or the best. So of the Haridasas, he is the best, which implies, according to Sri Chakravarti Pad, that Govardhana is superior even to Devarshi Narada, Yudhishthira Maharaj, and Uddhava. So where did these names come from? In other words, there are many servants of Bhagavan. Why does he mention them? Because you can find other places in the Bhagavatam itself where these three particular persons are described with that same phrase, Haridasa. So because Uddhava, Yudhishthir, and Devarshi Narada are spoken of as Haridas, specifically in the Bhagavatam, then Chakravartipad is taking it that to say that he is Haridas Varya means that he's the best even in comparison to others who are given this label, so therefore he's superior even to Devarshi Narad, Yudhishthir Maharaj, and Uddhava. So related to this, there's also the further implication that Govardhan is endowed to the greatest extent with the qualities of removing sin and suffering, as well as that of captivating the heart. So Sanatana Pad is saying that the qualities of the object of bhakti come into the vessel of bhakti. So if the object of bhakti can purify sin and capture the mind or attract the mind, then that bhakta can as well. And if Govardhan is the best of bhaktas, then he's also the best at purifying people and captivating their mind. This is what he's drawing out from this description. Sri Jivapad comments that Govardhan's greatness in this regard is made evident by the service he offers. In other words, why is he described as the best of Hari's servants? Because he does the best service, because his seva is the best. So what is that seva? Then that's also described here, meaning he is regarded as the greatest servant of Hari because he renders the greatest service to Hari. And in this regard, Sri Sanatana Pad explains that the compound describing Govardhan as, quote, he who is possessed of great delight at the touch of Rama and Krishna's feet, can also alternately convey that Govardhan is, quote, he who causes delight greatly for Krishna's pleasing feet in numerous ways, such as with his own touch, which is felt by Sri Krishna to be very soft by virtue of his pebbles immediately being made like butter, that is, becoming butter soft, in places where those lotus feet of Krishna are placed, and which becomes very cooling at times of warmth, and warm at the time of cold. So he's taking it here, or he's pulling out some additional significance and describing that that if he's said here to be, quote, how was it put originally? Possessed of delight at the touch of Rama and Krishna's feet. So one of the differences that they take is the phrase in the verse itself is Rama Krishna Charana. So you could read Rama Krishna there as a dual compound, a dvandva samas, where Rama is one person and Krishna is another, so the feet are the feet of Rama and Krishna. Or you could read Rama Krishna not as a reference to Rama meaning Balaram and Krishna, but Rama as an adjective describing Krishna. So then it would be the feet of Rama Krishna, meaning the feet of Krishna who is Rama. So Rama meaning delightful, pleasing, or what have you. So that's where he's getting part of that alternate sense. So by saying he who is possessed of great delight at the touch of Rama and Krishna's feet, why is he possessed of great delight? Then if you interpret the word Rama as an adjective, then you get the reason. So he's possessed of great delight at the feet of Krishna because Krishna is Rama, because Krishna is so pleasing or so delightful. And then, alternate to that, he's saying, he who causes great delight greatly for Krishna's pleasing feet. So in that way, you can take it rather that it's not that he has the delight at Krishna's feet, but that there is delight from Krishna's feet touching him. So if you read, these are different, these are all grammatically possible depending how there's a lot of different hermeneutical approaches to interpreting compounds. So both of them are grammatically valid. So he's taking it this way, that rather than saying Govardhan is who has delight at the touch of Krishna's feet, you can also interpret it as in the context of what's called a bahuvrihi samas, or an adjectival compound as a whole, that he is who causes delight by his touch for Krishna's feet, like this. So he who causes delight greatly for Krishna's pleasing feet in numerous ways. So if you give that adjectival compound interpretation, then you need some explanation. What kind of delight does he cause? So he gives the sense of, he refers to then the word sparasha, meaning touch, so that delight must be related to the touch. So how would Krishna's feet get delight from his touch? So then he gives examples. That there would be a very soft texture. So then what's usually not pleasing on a mountain, like hard, jagged rock, he's saying that if for Govardhan to be soft, he couldn't by his touch, or cause delight by his touch. He couldn't do that if he was just hard, jagged rock. So therefore the implication is that his hard jaggedness becomes butter soft wherever Krishna steps. And moreover, if the rock can get very hot when it's sitting in the sun, it can also get very cold when there's no sun, so it can cause, discomfort by being too hot or too cold. So then the idea is that when it's hot out, he keeps himself cool. When it's cool out, he keeps himself warm. And in this way, his touch causes delight for Krishna's feet. So this is how, the meaning is coming out of the phrase. Then, Sri Sanatana Pad elaborates in this regard by saying that this compound, Rama Krishna Charana Sparasha Pramoda, can convey, actually that should be a capital K, that Govardhan causes delight for Sri Krishna, for the gopis, and for the entire world by way of facilitating Sri Krishna's leelas, which are purifying and captivating of the entire world. So, in the previous interpretation, the idea was he is a cause of delight by way of his touch for Krishna's feet. But in another way, you can take the recipient or who becomes delighted by him, rather than taking it as only Krishna's feet, but by taking it in the abstract, that he is delighting, or he is delightful, by the touch of Krishna's feet. In other words, by hosting Krishna, he is delightful. So delightful to who? Well, to everybody. The way, you might just describe someone. Oh, do you know this person? Oh yes, they're lovely. They're delightful. Does that mean only to me or only to you? No, it just means in general to everyone. They're just a delight. So he's then giving a third interpretation like that. So thus the sense is that he causes delight for Krishna, for the gopis, for everyone, for the whole world, by being the host or the place where Krishna puts his feet. In other words, he's a good place for Krishna to put his feet. In other words, by the services that he offers, Krishna likes to come there. Krishna likes to set foot there. And thereby, everyone, Krishna, the gopis with whom he treats there, as well as the whole of the world who gets to have darshan of this or serve this directly or indirectly, everyone is delighted. So, also, why is he including the gopis at this particular point? Because the gopis are the speaker of this verse. So if the gopis are speaking this, then they're also speaking of this in reminiscence of their leelas with Krishna there, or the ways that Govardhan also renders service such that it causes pleasure for them in the course of their leela with Krishna. So, he adds that the compound also conveys that because of Govardhan's being the best of Hari's servants, Sri Krishna is ever engaged in an endless stream of extraordinary pastimes of prema in and around Govardhan. So, if he's the best servant of Hari, then that would imply that Hari is going to want to take pleasure in his service more than anybody else's, because it's the most pleasing. So that would imply that there's going to be a lot of Leela at Govardhan. Because, why would Krishna deny himself the joy of having Leela there when the facility is the best, when the service he receives there to facilitate his Leela is the most excellent. If Krishna is so intent upon satisfying the gopis or satisfying his bhaktas, and the best means for doing so are provided by Govardhan, then his own bhakta vatsalya, his own prem vashyata, will compel him to have Leela at Govardhan. This would be a further implication. So thus, the commentator is saying that there's an endless stream of extraordinary pastimes of prem in and around Govardhan. And because of this, those who come in touch with Govardhan, which is always consequently in touch with Krishna's feet, can feel the bliss felt in touching Krishna's feet directly. So he's really, extending it here, you can say. So the idea being that if Krishna is so pleased by the services offered by Govardhan that he always wants to perform Leela there, that would imply that Krishna's always in touch with Govardhan. So the implication would be that if Krishna's feet are touching Govardhan and you touch Govardhan, then you should come in touch with Krishna's feet. Why not? This makes sense by simple spatial logic. So what he's evoking then is the sense that by going to Govardhan, by doing parikrama of Govardhan, by worshipping Govardhan, one can come in touch with Krishna directly, or that's a way of directly rendering service to Krishna's feet. A further implication of this aforesaid range of meaning is that Govardhan's great delight at the touch of Sri Krishna's feet and his service to Sri Krishna, that is, his causing great delight for Sri Krishna, are one and the same. His acts of service are seen as both expressions of his own delight and causes of delight for Krishna. So reading it this way, if you go back to the first interpretation of this compound, that he has delight at the touch of Krishna's feet, then when it's describing in the second half of the verse that he honors Krishna with his grass and so forth, then you can take it that is illustrating or explaining the delight that he feels. So the implication then would be that these services that he's offering are expressions of his own delight, or consequences of that. So according to analysis by way of rasa tattva, anubhavas and sattvika bhavas are ensuant effects of the experience of rasa made possible by the presence of the sthayi bhav. So when someone has rati, or the sthayi bhav, then the effects of that manifest in the form of the anubhavas, their acts of service or their different activities they perform, as well as the involuntary or emotional physical expressions in the form of perspiration or horripilation or what have you. So Sanatana Gosvami is taking it that the delight mentioned in the compound is then illustrated by the services in the second half, the implication then being that these are all his sattvika bhavas. So his horripilation manifests in the form of growing grass. His perspiration manifests in the form of moisture or dew on that grass. His tears of joy manifest in the form of flowing waters, and so on. So then, the slopes along the base, the lower areas of Govardhan filled with rich, grass, this can be seen like his hair standing on end. And the dew that hangs upon the grains and the other things in those grasses, that can be seen to be like his perspiration. And the tears that he sheds can be seen to be like the creeks or the waterfalls or the various flowing waters coming down the mountain. So in that way, when you have darshan of Govardhan, to see the water falling down the hill, to see the grass growing upon the hill, to see the dew, out along the hill, this can all be seen as, manifestations of his ecstatic love for Krishna. The Braja Gopis themselves elaborate in the verse that Govardhana renders service to Krishna with, quote, beverages, fine grass, hollows, bulbs, and roots. So now the commentators have a nice go at explaining all of these. So the phrase is paniya suyavasa kandara kandamulai. That is, with beverages in the form of water, honey, fruit juices, and so on. So what beverages can you get at Govardhana? In addition to the excellent drinking water, there's also honey that grows, or that, is produced by the bees living in the trees. Along the mountain, there's also fruits growing. From the fruits can be extracted juices. So those also count as collectively Govardhana's beverages. So you've got fruit juices, you've got honey, you've got water. Then fine grasses. That is, grasses which are finely fragrant, exceptionally soft, increasing of development, and productive of milk. So the cows come to graze on Govardhana. He provides excellent pasture or fodder for these cows, which give rise to all their excellent milk. Hence he's known as Govardhana, right? Govardhana, he who nourishes the cows. So his grasses are the means by which he nourishes the cows. So all the wonderful wealth that the people of Vraja have, all the wonderful milk products that they prepare and offer to Krishna, those are all seen to come back to the richness of the grasses that the cows get to eat at Govardhana. Because, as you can see in India, if you eat milk from cows that are just fed this very dried out, cord that's very cheap and mustard seed cakes all the time, the milk is not that rich because the cows are, on ropes all day, sitting in front of a concrete trough eating very, very dry things. But if you compare that to the milk that you can drink from a cow that eats fresh, rich green grasses and herbs and other types of shrubs and a wide variety of different types of plants that have all different types of medicinal qualities, then how rich the milk becomes. So that Govardhana offers these fine grasses. And also, I take it that when it mentions fragrant, we don't always think of that, but if anyone has ever collected fresh vetiver grass, then there's an extraordinary fragrance that comes from that, and other types of grasses that go along water edges. So there's the grasses that grow for the cows, that's one thing, but vetiver grass can also be used as something for brushing and simply as a fragrance, so that there will be, with breezes moving through the reeds of these, vetiver, also some very excellent fragrances and atmosphere are created by the grasses as well. And on top of that, grasses in which you can lay, in which you can roll and play, so very soft grasses, and not ones that are thorny or full of stickers that stick to your cloth and all of that, but grasses that are very soft and excellent for sports and wrestling and all sorts of things. So the fine grasses of Govardhana. And then his hollows, that is, caves, which are replete with sitting places and lying places, and which remain cool during the hot season and warm in the cold season. So his caves are also there. There are sometimes, trysts arranged inside the caves. Some of Rupa Goswami's descriptions in the Ujjal Nilamani feature the meeting of Radha and Krishna in a cave in Govardhana. And thus, not only are there caves, but inside the caves there are, arrangement of the rocks such that there are places to sit, places to lie. Not just you go in there and there's some dirt and snakes, things like that, but there's some, wonderful place to be. So these are also offerings. And then bulbs, that is edible bulbs like giant bulrush, and roots, that is various types of edible roots. So snacks, foods that can be found all throughout the hillsides. So these are all said to be the things that Govardhana offers. The commentators also get into a few variant readings. So according to alternate interpretations and readings of the compound Paniya Suyavasa, the verse also conveys that Govardhana serves Sri Krishna with waterfalls. In the case of interpreting the compound as Paniya Suvasa, Yavasa. So Yavasa means grasses. So Suyavasa can mean fine grasses or excellent grasses. And then Paniya means that which is drunk, meaning water. So in that way you get drinking or beverages, that which is drunk, and Suyavasa, fine grasses. But if you break the compound with the Su going along with Paniya rather than as a prefix to Yavasa, then Su can also mean something that falls or something that descends. So Paniya Su can mean the falling of that which is drunk, meaning a waterfall. That's another interpretation. Alternately, with flowers, fruits, and other plant products, in the case of interpreting the compound as Paniya, Su, and Yavasa. So if you break it, rather than putting the Su along with the first word or along with the second word, if you make it a separate word altogether, then you get this third meaning to include flowers and fruits. And with beautiful sitting places, in the case of the reading of the compound as Paniya Bhu Yavasa. So there's a variant Bhu instead of Su, so if you take the Bhu and make it an individual word, then you get a three-part compound, which yields this additional meaning of places to sit. So, further food for contemplation, so to speak. So, why all these descriptions? Why do they spend this much time going into all this analysis? Because for them to contemplate the leelas of Radha and Krishna, Krishna with his other companions in Govardhana, all of this is the atmosphere for that, the environment for that, the paraphernalia for that. And so to have a rich and vivid sense of all of these features of the environment is conducive to absorption in such meditation and entering into the spirit of Braj, so to speak. So there's, abounding abundance, freshness, and, beauty, which evokes a sense of being fortunate to be present and, elicits a sense of play, elicits a sense of free-spiritedness and seizing the moment, so to speak. All of these elements can be like the Vyanjana coming out from all of this. In other words, if someone, even in, ordinary worldly life, if someone goes out for a hike, so to speak, to a waterfall or a mountaintop or some natural lookout or some, then this is typically a situation in which people take time to contemplate their life or have an in-depth conversation with a companion or, see this as like a moment of great value in their life, so to speak. So to describe all of these beautiful features of Govardhana, we can also just, in a broad sense, take it that to be there, to be in the midst of all of those things would fill one with such a sense of being in, so to speak, right here, right now. Like there's no other place I would like to be. I don't know, at least I grew up in California, and I remember it was popular, to have bumper stickers. That there were these series of bumper stickers that people would put on their cars where they would describe where they would rather be. Where, in other words, you pull up behind someone in traffic and then you read their bumper sticker. I would rather be skiing in the Sierra Nevadas, or I would rather be surfing at the beach in Laguna Beach, or whatever. People would put these different things on there. So there's this idea of, wanting to be in some excellent setting where you can do your favorite activity. So all of these features of Govardhana, they're like the place that you would rather be. So when you're there, what would it be like? What does it feel like to actually be there? You're truly there, so to speak. With the fullness of your being, you can, all the richness of your own character will naturally, effuse out of you when you're in that, most idyllic setting, so to speak. So such is the environment or the stage of this Leela. The mention in the verse of these aforementioned items also implies that Govardhan offers service with jewels, bedsteads, seats, lamps, mirrors, and other paraphernalia across its valleys, slopes, peaks, and so on. So, in other words, upalakshana. In other words, when it mentions this set of 5 things, does it mean these 5 and nothing more? Is it a finite list? So they're saying, no, it's not a finite list. Rather, it's a suggestive list, meaning it means these 5 and others that you could put in the same category. So then that there will be jewels, that there will be, nice perches, that there will be excellent lookouts. This is all suggested or implied by the description. So in other words, whatever, beautiful features of a natural environment that we might have conceived of or observed in our sojourn of worldly experience, then all of that and more is the scene, so to speak, there at Govardhan. So whatever sort of excellent and beautiful natural paraphernalia might suit Radha and Krishna's Leela, it's all there. Sri Sanatana Pad specifies that Govardhan serves the cows and other animals herded by Sri Krishna with his water and fine grasses all the time, with his caves on occasion, and with his bulbs and roots sometimes, whereas he serves Krishna along with his friends with all the aforementioned items all the time, that is, daily. So in the verse it says, Saha go ganayas tayo yat, that he serves Krishna along with his go and his gone. In other words, his cows and his companions. So then he's saying, so now he's taking a temporal analysis and saying that, because the present tense can mean both something done now, meaning only at this moment, or it can refer to something that's frequentive, something that's frequent, or to something that's just always the case. So now he's, in essence, commenting on the significance of the present tense and saying that in the application of the verb, the tense, the meaning of the tense of the verb to this element in the compound of the cow, it will apply sometimes all the time, sometimes occasionally, like this. But in the case of the other member of the compound, it'll imply all the time. In other words, that every day Krishna is on the slopes, he's in the caves, he's in the valleys, he's in the rivers, he's in the waterfalls, he's in the grass, he's eating the fruits, he's drinking the honey, In other words, this is all happening every day. And in the case of the cows, they might not always make their way into the caves, but they might sometimes, if it rains, during the rainy season or some special occasion. And they might not always eat roots or certain bulbs found around Govardhan, but they might sometimes. So he's adding this, temporal gradation, if you will. Sri Chakravarti Pad sees it that these items that Govardhan manifests and offers in service, which are regarded as his sattvika bhavas, are also comparable to the paraphernalia offered during ritual worship of Sri Bhagavan. So now, he's now making an additional comparison, saying all these, the grass and the water and so forth of Govardhan, these are sattvika bhavas, but they're also like the puja that someone offers to the deity. So how so? He says that Govardhan's finely fragrant and cooling waterfalls are like offerings of foot wash, mouthwash, and drinking water. So during the course of puja, you wash the feet of the Thakur, you offer mouthwash to the Thakur, you offer drinking water to the Thakur. So Govardhan's rivers, Govardhan's waterfalls are like the way that he's doing that. Govardhan's honey, fruit juices, and other excellent beverages are like food offerings. Govardhan's durva grass is like an offering of argya, and Govardhan's other grasses are ideal foods for the cows, as well as excellent picnic sites for Sri Krishna and his friends. So just as to perform puja, there's a place established, Govardhan provides the place, he provides these foods and beverages and everything else that you would use in the midst of a ritual offering. From this perspective, Govardhan's caves, slopes, peaks, and so forth can be seen as offered seats or asanas. His rainfall, waterfalls, rivers, and ponds can be seen as bath offerings. His bulbs and roots, along with his shoots and fruits, can be seen as additional food offerings, and his flowers can be seen as fragrance and flower offerings. In light of the greatness, the paramount bhakti of Govardhan, made known through the aforesaid verse, it can be understood that Bhagavan Sri Krishna takes immense pleasure in eating atop Govardhan all the foods offered by the mountain that he and his friends collect during their excursions to Govardhan. So, taking the analysis from the Venu Gita, applying it to the verse we're talking now, when it says that Krishna is pleased by the food atop Govardhan, then we can apply it in that way, that it refers to all the foods that can be collected from around Govardhan, that when he eats there with his lunch with his friends, that this is what's alluded to. And, another alternate sense, the meaning of Sri Krishna eating atop Govardhan in the verse under discussion can also be understood to refer to his eating the packed lunches that Mother Yaśodā and his friends' mothers send with them for their day-long cowherding runs outside the village. So the verse says, the food on top of Govardhan. So another way of interpreting it is, rather than the food that Govardhan specifically provides, but the food that he eats when he's on the top of Govardhan. So he also brings, his mother also sends some foods from him. We hear in the Bhagavatam how sometimes Krishna and his friends would snatch each other's lunches or stick flowers inside the foods that they had and then feed them to the other without telling them that there was flowers stuck inside the kachori or whatever it was. So it can also refer to the pleasure he takes in eating all the food cooked by his mother and the other mothers of the village when he's there at Govardhan at lunchtime. So this is one way we can reflect on, or we can contemplate the pleasure Krishna feels in this item. Then the mention next in the verse under discussion of the abundance of breast milk offered by Yaśodā was mentioned in the previous verse and discussed in the commentary thereupon. So we discussed that previously, we won't go into that again. And next we come to the quote, food presented by Bharadvāja. So I think I'll leave that for next time. We'll look at the passages in the Ramayana that describe how the sage Bharadvāja fed Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana. So one point of distinction between this verse and the previous verse was in the previous verse you had mentions all related to offerings made to Krishna, whereas in this verse you have a mixture of offerings made to Krishna as well as offerings made to Rama. So this poet is writing in a little bit of a broader scope, but we'll also look at relevant passages in the Ramayana to that. So we've had a little connection issue today. I think I won't force it. I'll just leave it at that for today. So I hope that our discussion of all of the service offered by Govardhan, the beautiful atmosphere of Govardhan, all the beautiful features of the environment at Govardhan are fruitive in one's meditation. And that, as Mahaprabhu was traveling about, whatever forest he saw, he thought it was Vrindavan. Whatever mountain he saw, he thought it was Govardhan. That what we observe in our natural environment, that it may be a natural trigger or a signifier of Govardhan and remembrance of Krishna's Leela there, remembrance of the prema, remembrance of the bhakti found there, then these discussions may also serve to enrich that sort of samskar. So I'll conclude here. If anyone has any comments, questions, corrections, or feedback of any other type, please feel free to share. All right, well, if not, we can leave it at that. And if we're so blessed, then in our next reading, we'll look further at the beautiful offerings made to Sri Bhagavan by his dear bhaktas. Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Shri Guru, Jai Shri Gaur, Jai Jai Radhe Shyam.